Welcome to the Startup Grind.
All right, we'll get started here. My name is John Milham. Thanks for coming out. Startup Grind Kalamazoo, the second event. Here we have Jack Aarons, who was the interviewee in October. And tonight we have Charles Fierke. So let's give it a hand for Charles here. Before we get, I thank my wife, who actually provided the food, as well as Maria Brennan. And feel free to get up and eat some more while we're interviewing or talking here. So, and also I want to thank Jen Randall and the Meister Group for hosting us. So thank you very much. Real quick, I want to give a little bit of background of Startup Grind. Right? It's actually started by Derek Anderson out of the Silicon Valley. We actually have 50 cities that you have chapters. Kalamazoo is now one of them. And so what happens is you've got to realize that what this is about. One is about education. The other one is about inspiring people in the startup community and also connecting and building relationships. So Charles came early. I know you all met him earlier, able to talk. He'll actually stay around afterwards, able to talk to him one-on-one. Jack did the same thing for the first interview. So that's just part of this event. So I appreciate you all coming out and listening and hearing what each one of these people has to say. So, all right. Real quick, also, last one, okay? I want to give a big shout out to Starting Gate, who's actually helping us with the video. So thank you very much. Starting Gate is actually a business accelerator for students at Western. So if you want to get on the email list to know when the demo days are and investor days are, go ahead and get with Muhammad. So keep you guys abreast of what's going on with the student companies that are being started out of the accelerator. So. All right, are you ready, Charles?
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, very good. Okay, so the way this is set up is I'll ask a couple of questions and go for about 30 minutes. And after that, okay, I'll open up the floor to you all in terms of Q&A. So be ready for your questions as we go through this little talk. Okay. Softball question.
Pitch.
All right, here we go. All right. Can you tell me a story? When did Abraxas start?
Well, Abraxas still is known as legally as Team Sports Services, but the Abraxas brand came into vision last year. We spent a considerable amount of time kind of thinking about who we wanted to be when we grew up, and Team Support Services often got calls for a crisis center for teens or a staffing agency, and it definitely wasn't what we did. We had our start, though, in litigation support. So we were founded in 2000 in November, so we just had kind of our 13th birthday this year. And it was really kind of the vision to find kind of an all-in-one solution provider for law firms, for records management, for case management, for a lot of ancillary services that you had to shop in many different locations for. And at the time, there was a lot of paralegal work, there was a lot of service process and some other things. At the core of it was a lot of records management, a lot of moving of data, a lot of assisting the firms with that as part of their practice. I joined the firm in 2003, and it was actually an interesting combination of events. There was a large IP litigation case that had started over on the east side of Michigan, and it started with a call. I was working at a printing company at the time. One of my early partners, Roger McGee, was the owner of McGee Printing at the time, and still is. And we got a call for some printing of some documents. It's like, yeah, we're a printing company, we can print some documents. Got a CD, several thousand images on the CD, and we're like, okay. So we started printing, and the next thing you know, we're getting a FedEx with about 30 more discs. And can you print these all out too? After a couple of weeks, we were up to, I don't know, a couple 100,000 pages printed, and they were starting to review by paper hard copy. That's kind of the way practice was through the 90s and the early 2000s. So we found that and suggested there may be a better way. litigation review platforms were starting to come into their own. They weren't hosted solutions then, so they had to be hosted by the firms, by another agency. So we went in, we helped them set that up. Next thing you know, we went in with a proposal to set up 10 stations. It's much faster than reviewing a paper. At the end of the project, we had set up 2 different data centers in 3 different locations with 80 review stations each. We processed, for that case, over 122 million pieces of paper. Discovery was about 18 months, and it was just a whirlwind for them and for us. As I understand it, the case went well for all involved, but it was definitely an interesting experience working at a much larger scale in document management than I had had experience with before. My background was consulting, marketing and management consulting. Had done some startups for healthcare companies. Also did some market research plans. Back then we called them foreign market entry plans. Kind of international business was something I dabbled with at Michigan State. And so this whole new process of getting into large data, at the time large data was 122 million pages. Now it's big data, and it truly is big data. And that has changed quite a bit over the years. So the case goes on. After we get through discovery, there's lots of other ancillary services and follow-ups and additional cases, and everybody wants to know who just helped pull this off. So it was good word of mouth. I mean, a lot of referral business, a lot of good work. Around about, I think 2005, the Department of Justice asked if we'd work with them, the U.S. Department of Justice out of Virginia, was where their office was, to help them on a multi-state collection for another case, larger case that they were working on. It was a mobile collection, if you will, with some on-site scanning and some other document management. And it's great. It was kind of involved in a case, and it was an interesting opportunity. Really kind of started to gel, you know, where we were going with this organization. But we kept hearing this reoccurring question coming out of our customers. What do we do with this when it's all done? And at that point, we were working out of maybe 3,000 to 10,000 square feet, depending on when we had stretch space. And we worked with a lot of local businesses and different places to find stretch space in the area with a flexible labor force, so we could constantly keep working with these upcoming cases. And what we found is the commonality behind it is what do you do when it's over? You know, these records have to go somewhere. You have a lot of duplicity. You know, how long do you have to retain these things? What's really truly involved and what's important? And what it ended up evolving into in 2010, we opened our first major facility of about 120,000 square feet, dedicated to records management, record storage, best practices, and helping our customers get a better understanding around what they had coming. Approximately the same time, we also had a request from another larger corporation we're working with. They had an acquisition. So, and mobile collections, we've done these things. Well, no, everything's coming to you. We have somewhere in the neighborhood of 385,000 cartons. We need some help getting a better understanding. Okay, well, thankfully we now have space to be able to handle that. So there was a bit of an opportunistic, it was a bit of a leap. I was confident we had the right people. We had some amazing people that we ended up adding to the team about that time too. That was our first significant growth in resource. And as that continued to evolve, we now have 2 locations. And it spans not only still helping the legal community, but we work with a lot of major corporations to help them with their intellectual assets. It doesn't matter if it's paper or electronic. We'll go in and we'll help them do assessments of the records programs. We'll work with their electronic archive specialists to figure out exactly what they retain, because we're going paperless, right? Everybody knows that they haven't printed anything today, right? And so it was an interesting mix for us, and we were able to show a significant amount of value. And every time we get in and get a chance to just show someone, here's where you can get to a better place. One of my partners likes that phrase quite often. And it really is. It's a better place because we give them kind of an understanding of what they have in the situations. And we work with organizations in an acquisition or even a closure situation, helping an organization understand what they either just got or what they're about to lose. They don't get their heads wrapped around what information is either on electronic media, around electronic systems, or in paper documents, or in someone's filing cabinet. who's just about to walk out the door and you're never going to know exactly where everything was. Or you just acquired a company and you had no idea where the scope and span of control was within the document set, within the informational archives. So it's an interesting mix between electronic and paper. And that's kind of the space we live in. We work with very highly regulated organizations. Compliance is our niche. That was the other thing that was incredibly enlightening as we started getting into record storage in 2010. We were asked where our compliance program was, and we had procedures, and we had hiring practices and screening practices for our employees, and we had kind of the framework of some things, but we didn't understand compliance everything now. When you're being audited by Fortune 5 and Fortune 100 companies, and they're expecting you to have a compliance program that meets or in some cases exceeds some of the things that they require for their own departments, that's sobering. And it was a neat challenge. We're very grateful to and very thankful to have some really neat resources and consultants. We also have several very amazing people on our staff who pull those programs together, and they're constantly being updated. As we go across different organizations and different industries, we have to look at each industry and each organization to figure out what are the best practices and what are the requirements, and what are the governing requirements for each of those organizations. What regulations do they have to meet? So finance is different than healthcare, is different than life sciences, different than specifically regulated manufacturing organizations. And we, in our program, has to cover all of those, which is one of our key differentiators. And you're not stopping me, so I'm rambling on with that. You're supposed to nudge me if I ramble.
Well, let me ask you a quick question. When we talk about moving and growing, you recently bought a building. Why did you stay in the Kalamazoo area? Did the opportunity to move?
Yeah, and we are still asked by customers, well, how come Kalamazoo? Why Kalamazoo? Why this area? Why this location? We've got local providers in our area. One of the neat things, I'll get to the building in a second, one of the neat things that we can do is manage from a distance. Anywhere, everybody telecommutes and logs in from wherever. You can work from any place, anywhere. Through some interesting practices and cooperations and partnerships with other providers around basically the globe now. We're working with vendors for storage for electronic and paper media anywhere. So as far as managing an electronic collection or even a paper collection at a distance, it's easy to do. But what isn't easy to do is to put the practice in place to make sure that that's controlled and that's well regulated and that's well reported to the companies that use these services. But when we had an opportunity, we found out about the opportunity to take on additional space in this community, it didn't only mean a growth pattern for us, but it was also preservation to us. In that situation, we had an opportunity to look at an operation and a building and some other opportunities, and could be able to commit to keeping 30 additional jobs that would have otherwise left this area. And for us, that was really important. It wasn't just about growing the business at that point. It was also a conscious decision. We were going to do everything it took to be able to keep that here. All three of us, I have 2 other partners. I haven't mentioned that yet. I can get to that. You'll have to challenge me on some dates. Dates are not my forte. But all three of us are born and raised. Our hearts and souls and passions are here in Kalamazoo. Will we expand outside of the area? Possibly. There is a lot of geographic reach that we can do from here. A lot of large organizations are willing to invest in a single solution. It doesn't necessarily have to be 50 feet or 2 miles from the corporate headquarters or from their manufacturing plant. In this day and age of managing things remotely, it is very easy to do. So it was a unique opportunity. It definitely increased our footprint. We went up about 500,000 square feet, 468 I think to be exact, which had some significant challenges. If you've not owned a building of significant size, it's definitely interesting. Crash course in property management, facilities, and definitely all the infrastructure that goes with it, and all the compliance that goes with it, and managing your own facility is one that you own.
So did that actually grow the company in terms of number of employees?
We did pick up a few, definitely, through that, in the fact that we retained some of the jobs that would have gone elsewhere. We were on a steady path at that point as far as kind of our growth strategy. for what key people we needed to put in place. There were some gaps we were able to fill. One of the interesting things about our growth pattern and the timing of everything, so there have been a lot of bubbles in our economies. We've had housing bubbles, we've had market bubbles, we've maybe got another housing bubble. I was just talking to someone tonight about that coming. But one of the things that actually gave us a really neat opportunity to do is find people who would have otherwise been underemployed and give them meaningful jobs. We were very, very blessed and fortunate to find some incredibly great people that really wanted to stay in the area and had amazing skill sets. I am constantly amazed at how many more smarter people there are than I at our organization. More smart, that proves they're smarter than I at our company. But it was because of the opportunity and what was going on in the market and these opportunities to be able to keep some of these people. And they're just such a blessing. They're just such a neat group. So yes, we did bring on some more. Was it part of our strategy? Absolutely. Have we continued to grow since? Yes.
Well, are you excited about the growth? What are the positives and negatives of it?
Are there negatives to growth? Yes, there are negatives. Sometimes. Positives to growth, you can make a more significant impact. The larger you are, the more effect for positive change. A story I should share with you guys, the 3 partners that I have now. It was a really awakening moment. We spent some time retreating. Sometimes those are productive, sometimes they're not. But we spent some time retreating. Went to Henderson Castle here in Kalamazoo. It's kind of a crazy landmark. It may be haunted. And we sat down and we talked about what our vision was. What is our vision for the next 5 years? And at the core of it, what was our why? As business owners, as entrepreneurs, and all the challenges that entails, what was our why? And we came down to, with 3 of us, we came down to 3 key themes. And I've spent a lot of time volunteering. I like working with kids. I've been a high school youth counselor for 14 years now. That's where my heart and passion, one of them, is. For me, education is huge. One of the fun things I get to do in my current role and in some of my past roles at Abraxas was to spend time working with individuals to help train them on systems, to train them on new processes, to get in and explore with them where they're at now and what other things they could be doing. And it's fun to watch them have the aha moment, to share that experience with them, but also to leave them feeling like they had a better day and they had a better program and they had a better outcome because you helped them. Whether it was me now or it was one of our many people who are very good at doing that also. That's exciting. Our second one was philanthropy. Huge. This past year, one of our proud moments, and Max here in the audience today, we dedicated to having a community outreach manager. Basically, the program, with the support of volunteers within our organization, within our community outreach committee, is to figure out what we can do to make a significant impact to our committee or our community every single month in everything we do. We gave them a little bit of a budget, and they've taken it and just done amazing things. I never would have guessed they would have had as much time and been able to pull off as many things as they've had with the budget we gave them. It's like you give them a little and they've done a lot. And it's exciting. We're working with our community. We're working with our neighborhood. We started a new little business alliance. We had a kickoff for that last night, in fact. And there's just neat things. We work with local charities. Every month there is an opportunity for people within our organization to be able to feel the reward of being a philanthropist. When you see that in someone, and that reward and that recognition and that excitement and that joy that they get from sharing with others, you've planted that seed and that continues on. That was very important to us. So that was one thing that, as part of this growth, I'm trying not to stray too far from your conversation, your question. And I talk a lot with my hands, I just realized that. But it gave us an opportunity, as part of that growth, to be able to do more things like that. Last thing, number 3, was policy. So when you think policy, it's not just about rules and regulations. It's about leaving a legacy. Did you make an impactful change in the industries you're working in? Did you help bring some sort of governance, some sort of organization, some sort of structure that helped everything get to a better place? Again, that phrase. So between educate, philanthropy, I'm in trouble with that word tonight, and policy, those were the three things that we all just looked at each other and said, these are the things that are meaningful to us. And we put those at the core of our values, and also sat down and came up with our values, which we shared with our entire organization. And that, I think, is part of the growth. That was exciting. Some of the things that were challenging in growth. When you see an organization go from a startup and into what I've learned in the last few years is known as a stage 2 organization, you find that there are points that you're good at and some things you're not so great at. One of the things we found out we weren't good at was communicating to our internal staff. You know, we'd have a new hot, exciting project or a new opportunity come in, and everyone was on board. Everybody was running in that same direction, and we'd forgotten to tell half the people what we're doing. And it was funny because we took a moment and did the surveys, and we sat down and we actually talked to some people, and they're like, they did not understand why we had done some of the things we've done, and that was a mistake. And that was because we grew too fast. And maybe not too fast, but we had missed pieces along the way. And I guess, is one of the things I would say, and I will get to nuggets later, but is, as a startup organization, and as you add staff, make sure you always take a minute to make sure you cast the vision, and if you may have to do it daily, so that people understand how this contributes to what you're doing. You'll find that they're much more clear as to how and what they're doing, and we've got a coach here in town that likes to say row the boat. They'll all row in the same direction. And they'll happily do that. But you have to be able to cast a vision. You have to do it clearly. So that was a challenge.
You talk about a leap for yourself, so you actually have a leap for the employees as well.
Yeah, a leap for myself, I think, and I know is one of the questions we talked about too. Type A. I don't know if there are any other type A's in the crowd. Making sure, especially as your name's associated with something, you want it to be perfect. And you can get into analysis paralysis. But it's also being able to take what you've learned and what you know you can do and handing that off to the next person and letting them struggle with it, letting them succeed with it, control. Maybe that was one of the challenges for me personally. Maybe not us as an organization, but I know as a business owner, going into kind of a growth curve into the next stage in the new model, it was things that would get, what you would hiccup on would be that handing the baton. To go back and look at the things and the way in which we did them, I think we would take some more deliberate steps in that. But yeah, for me personally, in that growth pattern, when I started, I did everything. I mean, we were 15 people. I mean, you pay the bills, you do the invoices. You're up till midnight making sure that client proposal got done. You're maybe running around at midnight with the customer, making sure that something's up to date for the next morning when the next crew comes in, or the next set of attorneys come in, or the next review comes in, or the next submission needs to get in the hands of the regulatory authority. It got to the point, and that was probably 2008 or 7 even, where you have that realization where you can't pull an all-nighter and continue to pull something out if something goes horribly wrong. You have to trust in your people. And that was an interesting moment. You look around, you see an amazing crew of people, a few more than we have here tonight, and you realize that you need to make sure that you're empowering them to do what they need to do to be successful. And your job went from doing what they're doing now to making sure that they can do what you were doing. And that was an interesting transition. You always try to make sure you're intentional with that. That you take those moments to do that. You don't always get it right.
You have to grow and compete in your industry.
To be able to stay competitive. In our business, to stay competitive, I think you need to constantly look at where the trend in information management, RIM, records and information management, phrases you'll all now know. You have to know where the trends are going. I mean, everybody said, going paperless. Yes, we've all gone somewhat paperless. Trends in where data is going, trends in where practice is going. You always have to stay, in our business, ahead of compliance to new regulations. Regulations can change. The core governance policies around why you're doing what you're doing and why your practices are best practices doesn't change when the regulations can. Do we have to grow to continue to compete? At some level, yes. I think as we focus, though, on making sure that we are meeting the obligations and/or exceeding, and as we increase our breadth of the different industries we're in, it continues to further differentiate us from what others are doing. Because we can speak to a broader audience, and now we've got something that's best of breed. Well, maybe in manufacturing that's not necessarily required, but over here in life science, over here in finance, it is. And it's not a bad practice that could be used here in a regulated manufacturing environment, and they get the benefit of that. That helps to differentiate us. That also helps to continue to grow. It sets the growth strategy in the curve for us. As we continue to grow, yeah, it gives us efficiencies. For sure, that's been one of the interesting things that we've recognized over the last few years is scale definitely gives you some efficiencies. You can compete at a larger scale, more international scale. Especially when you work with multinational corporations, you have to be able to compete globally. Even in our little Kalamazoo community.
So talk about employees. You mentioned partners. Why do you need partners?
You look for people who can back you up, who have the things that you don't, at a very basic level, at a very core level as a partner. I learned fairly quickly that I can only do so much, especially as the span of the organization changed. I've actually had 2 past partners. The partners I have now are not the partners that started the company. I'm very, very fortunate to have the ones that I do now, but also was a lot more intentional, maybe, in having the partner. I have one of them here. And how that worked. And she's sending a picture to my wife, or to our other partner, who is working tonight. So, and that's the benefit of having a partner. Someone's still working. What I found is that you are very careful in making sure that you're well aligned with people you want to go into business with. The other partners that I've had, great people. We're all in different places. Different points in our lives. I was in a different point in my life when I started the company, or when I joined this company, this iteration of it. I was single, workaholic, still kind of a workaholic, probably not as much of one. But time was everything. I had all the time to commit to anything we could. We pulled out some amazing stuff, still do. But you need the backup. You need that other voice. You need that. You can do that through advisors. When you have a partner or partners, you've built kind of a depth of a team that also can help mentor. That carries on, your communications with your executive team or your managers. Having one voice is good. Having a good, decisive voice for your organization is definitely an absolute. But being able to take and evaluate kind of next steps, where you're going, approach on things, putting a few different perspectives on that beyond your managers, and looking and casting the vision ahead for the organization with one or more partners is very helpful.
What about the highs and the lows in your business? How have you dealt with those? Can you give a couple of specifics there?
Sure. A couple years ago, had just an amazing year. Found myself standing in New York in one of those, just as you could imagine in the movies or whatever, boardrooms, to give a presentation in front of senior leadership, ELT or wherever you want to look at that in an organization. And walked into the room, and it was just a euphoric experience. I mean, it was absolutely amazing. I was completely confident that what we had to offer was exactly what they needed. Knew we were going up against some very large organizations. One of our main competitors is a $3.2 billion organization, and they're all over the world. How do you go up against the 800-pound gorilla? You do it with the differentiators. You do it with things that matter and speak to your customers. And we sat down and we had an amazing conversation. We told stories. We engaged them with the right information that they needed to make the right decision. I never would have, in my wildest dreams, found myself sitting in New York City in a boardroom in that kind of an experience. Ton of fun. Good high. Good outcome. Same year. found myself at what essentially was a site closure over in the UK, and bringing together disparate groups of teams to come up with best practices and plans for how to work through managing what was kind of a tough situation for that organization, and making sure that everything was carried forward correctly. Again, I'd never been off the continent. It was kind of a new experience for me. And I'm sitting there with two other team members, three of us, and we're leading this, large site closure, large opportunity, and that was another amazing experience. The growth, sure. All of the different people that we brought on, all the great talent, lots of highs. Some of the lows, finding out that the culture isn't exactly what you thought it was. Taking a moment to say, do you guys know where we're going? Do you understand who we are? And they say no. Correctable. But disappointing because you realize that that's on you. You weren't leading that vision correctly. Even though in the end everything resolved fine, having separations with partners. For an organization of not a significant size, we're not a multinational, having to go through the loss of a partner or the transition of a partner, that's tough. There's lots that goes behind that. These are people that you work countless hours with to build an organization and to get to the realization that you're kind of headed in different directions. That's tough.
How does the differences in goals play into that with multiple partners?
Well, and back to what I was saying, this is why you have to be very careful and spend significant time making sure that you've got an ownership group that really is cohesive. The same goals, the same outcomes, the same directions, the same kind of mindset. You don't want all 3 or 4 or 10 whatever partners thinking exactly the same way. Then you're going to all make the same mistake because you didn't have the right diversity. But putting the right people together makes significant difference. When you have different goals, when I'm at a different point in my life and have different abilities for commitment than I do another partner, that's tough. And that's all, even if you believe that everything's okay in the moment. 2 months from now, 6 months from now, you maybe don't feel that same way. And it's amazing how when things go unspoken and they'll fester within a partnership. And it's not fun. There's not a whole lot you can do. You try to be as transparent as you can in the relationship, and hopefully, and in not all cases, but you come to the realization that you are going in different directions. And there are ways through that. But that part of the growth challenge, also part of the challenge is the highs and lows that we come through.
2 more questions here. All right. One goes back to culture. What is this? And then the last one is, what 3 nuggets would you like to bring up to the audience?
So after we spent some time figuring out what Abraxas is, I don't know if anyone's sitting out there wondering how we came up with Abraxas. We spent a significant amount of time, and I'll credit Mac here in the back, did an amazing job helping us vet a number of branding agencies. We ended up with Skidmore Studios. They're out of Detroit, Michigan, and it was funny. I got to tell this short story. One of the, probably not the deciding factor, because there's a lot of fun people there, but they have a lady there who answers the phone. Thank you for calling Skidmore Studios. Oh, and I should set this up. You would assume that she's probably, later in her career, shall we say. And I've met her. She's the sweetest, nicest lady, least assuming person you'd ever want to meet. Very pleasant. And she says, her sweet little voice, thank you for calling Skidmore Studios, a kick-ass marketing organization. Oh, we've got to work with these people. And they ran us through a series of names, and Abraxas was one. And they wouldn't tell us what they wanted to do with it or what was behind it. And they then told us that, well, one of the translations from Greek, I believe, is that knowledge written in stone. I kind of like that. And it all kind of sank in with all of us. And we each kind of reacted with it differently. They gave us some concepts, and you can see the logo and everything else. But one of the things that they also helped us through was you don't just brand externally, you brand internally. And you have to help to consciousness, and we hadn't done always that well before. You have to help your organization through that. So we came up with the Abraxas Y card. And what's neat about it is it kind of at a glance, and again, not invented here. There are lots of organizations that use something similar. There's one south of us here, I think Three Rivers, Armstrong International. Neat organization. If you ever get a chance to, and they're great. They'll love to talk to you. Come see me afterwards. They've got a Y card too. So we shamelessly stole from them, and they were absolutely excited about it. And they give all of their employees one of these, and this is what we've done too, and we've actually given these to now customers, because customers really kind of like what it does, or what it says. And it talks about responsibility, it talks about who we are as a culture, and what we do as an organization. But it also, on the back here, it talks about the butterfly effect. Not the movie, but kind of the concept behind that, is that you can make a significant difference from the little things you do in every single part of your day, whether it's in our outreach, for our Abraxas outreach campaigns, whether it's just making sure your document is exactly the way it should be before you pass it on, the one of many of thousands you do every single day to the next person, because it makes a significant impact on the customer experience. So everybody, Abraxas part about that, everybody has an opportunity to make an impact within an organization. Raise a hand, offer a suggestion, very important. So as we went through the branding, that was a very important part of that. And we actually did that at our company picnic last September. We're actually making some new traditions. For a young company, we're creating traditions, and that's kind of fun too.
3 minutes.
Oh, 3 minutes. Okay, well, I did think about these ahead of time. I think, be intentional with what you do. And if you haven't heard me say it enough, make sure you communicate. Communicate internally. You can't over-communicate. Make sure people that are working with you feel like they need and have everything they need to know to roll along with you. Just giving people a look, making them feel included by something as simple as communicating something that you thought they already knew. Tell them again. That's huge within an organization. It helps a lot to do with culture. Being intentional, too, making sure that you reach back to the people, making sure that they understand how their contributions made a significant impact that day. That's huge, too. And it's cheap. It doesn't cost an organization a lot. It takes time. It takes away from your time as a manager. It takes away from your time as a leader. But it's an investment in every single person. And it's golden. Again, a topic I've kind of tossed around a few times is if you do have partners in your venture, as you start off or as you grow, make sure you're very intentional about that too. Spend some time working with your customer or with your partners to really truly understand that you're all going in the same direction. Sit down, do the exercise like we did. Come up with your whys. Even if they don't align, see if there's some commonality with where you're going. That is very important. Why are you doing it? Oh, I like making a great product. Really? Is that why you do what you do? Or is there something deeper? Look for that deeper thing that is really driving what you do, whether it's catering, whether it's investing, whether it's whatever. What is it that really lights your fire? And then infuse that in your business, and then make that, if not just your primary thing that you do, make that a part of what you do. It definitely gives you that sense of that you've made a significant impact with where you're at. 3? Do I have to do 3? Not necessarily. I would say definitely hire to your weaknesses, but also make sure that everyone truly understands their importance in it. I think I like the Zingerman's, where he says, Ari says, if you have a chance to read that, see him, go see him, he's fun. He talks about how everyone down to the janitor knows exactly what their mission is and what they're doing and how they contribute to that. One of the things that we did in an attempt to, and it's working slowly, but to work on our culture is we're doing regular meetings as an entire company. So we're standing up in front of everyone on a regular basis. Right now it's just monthly. That may increase, but everyone in that room knows exactly where we're going, knows what their potential is to help. So it really truly, janitorial staff, they're a part of who we are. so in that instance, as much in REs too, if the floors weren't clean, if the things weren't taken care of, they wouldn't pass their inspections. So they couldn't make their food. We're much the same way. We don't have a clean facility, we don't pass our audits. So everybody in our organization knows that they're making a significant contribution and a meaningful contribution to what they do. So that's fun.
Thanks, Charles. I'm going to open up the floor. Any questions for Charles? Yes, Pete.
Do you share your discouragements with your partners and with the rest of the people, or are you always the power of positive thinking?
Am I always positive?
Well, do you share your discouragement? You obviously have had some.
So it's been kind of fun, and I'll share something that came up too recently in our organization. So with these company meetings, we do much like we're doing now. We open it up for questions, and at the second, I think it was, we had an employee ask what I was standing up at the time, and I'm here, and this gentleman asks what I called at the time. The only thing I could think of was a courageous question. He goes, "Last year the bonuses weren't quite what we wanted. What are we going to do this year? You're giving us a bonus this year." I was like, "Oh." It was a courageous question. So the very next meeting we sat down, we talked about where we were then, where we are now. We share the struggles that we do have. If they don't know from their day-to-day activity and in their operational duties, we definitely highlight those as challenges, maybe not discouragements, but in those company meetings. And it gives everybody an opportunity to feel like they can make some suggestions. And that seems to be the thing that we have a lot of suggestions. So that's good. I mean, not all of them are going to be the most helpful, but it definitely helps people feel like they can at least try to contribute to fixing those discouragements. Sure, Jack.
I got a little bit lost, I think. Are you a document management company or a document storage company?
Oh.
Okay.
So.
And I wasn't confused.
No. So it's interesting. I mean, to walk you through the life cycle of what we do. Most of what we do is with information that will be at rest, shall we say, archive ready, whether that means electronic systems or paper. So the information enters us, whether it's a box, through kind of an in process. And basically what we do is we sit down with the customers and we figure out all the key things that are important to them about this information's needed to be stored? Yes, no. We'll work with your individual people who can submit. So if you have 20,000 employees throughout an organization, you sit down with them and you help write the rules to make sure everything comes in the right format. Because the last thing you want to do is have some vague generic description around say it's a box of material, come and just sit on a shelf for 50 years. That does the organization no good, and we're billing them so what. So we come up with a robust process, which we have, and we share with them what questions, what information, and we make some suggestions, because within the different industries, we kind of already know some of them. But what's important to your organization? All right, now does it need a retention? Sure. Yes, no, move it on to destruction. But whether that's an electronic system that needs to be retired, or it's email archives, or if it's loose, what we call unstructured data, or it's paper, we make sure everything comes into their system, or our system, depending on if we're retaining it for them or they've got their own system, comes in a very uniform way so that everything they've got, they know exactly that it's stored the right way, or it's been kept or not kept appropriately. We'll store it, we'll manage it, we'll manage the requests on it. So if it's a box of documents, we'll return those, we'll scan those, we'll go through, we'll do exploratories for them. If it's a piece of information that's in a retired system, we've got document specialists that will write very specific queries into retired systems because they're not in ongoing operational state at that point. They're just these huge monster programs that have been reduced down into a non-operational state. And our technicians will go in and pull back the information that they need. Legal requests, we do a lot of, and document destruction and electronic destruction. So it's kind of the whole life cycle at the point at which something leaves its active state and gets retained for an appropriate amount of time for the business's purpose. generally. Because we do some active management as well, depending on the customer.
As a business owner, I'd be curious, what keeps you up at night? What do you worry about?
Could I answer that to say it changes on a weekly basis? It's interesting. Consistently what is in the back of our minds, and I'll speak for our partners, but the other two of us, I think is making sure that you have the right talent to meet the growth strategy. So in this economy, you have to have right-sized organization. We have to have a right-sized organization. We can't keep a ton of bandwidth for growth. We can't justify that to our customers. So having the right amount of talent, but also recognizing that talent has to be very specialized for what we do. So that's always a challenge to make sure we have enough coming. So how we can address that, and how we've been addressing that, is a lot of internal promotion, education, recertification, encouragement and development of people. Everyone has to have kind of their growth strategy as far as managers and senior leaders to make sure that they are working to constantly replace themselves. We take on that next fairly significant contract. Do we have the bandwidth to be able to maintain that? And always making sure that we have at least 20 to 30% capacity in that, so we're not running too hot, and we can stay lean enough but still take on that additional work as we get it. Playing with that balance, we've had some ebb and flows. We've come really close to just pulling it off. Thinking years back now, there were some times where we made commitments that I know we could do, but it was right at that fine edge that if any one thing had gone significantly wrong, it would have been a problem. We don't take those kinds of risks now, but it's now making sure that the entire organization's set that way. There are lots of things. I mean, it used to be the silly little things, when's payroll coming, what's going on in HR. Thankfully a lot of that's subsided over the last few years. But I think it's just making sure that we're being fiduciarily responsible to the organization, making sure that they understand the decisions we make, sometimes they're not all easy, but that they understand them and that they understand kind of where we're going with that. Any questions?
You talked a lot about culture and the struggles you had with that as the company was growing. It seemed like that was kind of a pretty big pain point for you. What was the most important thing you did, or you think you did, to actually help change that and shift to getting more positive culture?
So I'll share something with you. It was interesting, and it'll be fun too. I hope a number of our people will watch this. So we did a survey within our organization. Surveys are great, right? You have to ask the right questions, otherwise you'll get back to junk. And you can get survey happy too. Trust me, we understand that, and we haven't. But some of the really biting things that came back from that were just amazing to us. So we took some time, and we got to a place where we started, asking some people to just come in and sit with us, the three partners. And some were very honest, some were fairly honest but cautious. And what we realized is that, either they get mad at us because they wouldn't understand what we were doing. We then, in turn, get mad at them because we couldn't understand why they were being mad at us and why we were seeing some of the problems we were having. And finally, what it came down to is we're like, enough. We had to just sit down in front of them and open up and have very, walls down conversations to try to, and it didn't settle it overnight. Don't get me wrong, it didn't settle all of it overnight. There was a lot of it that fairly quickly resolved itself. And I'm not talking that this thing was horribly wrong, but it was just that tension. You could feel it kind of pervading through the different departments. And it seems like every department would be a different week. But once we started kind of putting people up in front, and then we'd ask some of their representatives, some of the managers, some of the lower level managers, some of the, throughout the organization, to get up and actually do some of the speaking at these company events, at these company meetings, and present on ideas and to contribute. Great. You have a question? You want to sit on a committee? Let's get you a committee. Let's let you have that opportunity for a leadership opportunity within the organization. It's a small initiative, great, but you will understand that you have had an opportunity that And in almost every case, we've given them that opportunity so that they can take that and move on. And to make a meaningful contribution, we've got a space planning initiative right now that's going on. Kind of looking at the way we use our space, maybe adding a gym. That might be kind of fun. But also as to how ergonomically we work within our environment. Someone brought it up. Absolutely, let's champion that. So coming up and taking people who may have not felt like their voice was heard and making them into champions too, I think was a real turning point in some of the problems we were seeing kind of under the culture that was going on. So transparency, I guess, is the word for all of that. You know, it's a word that gets overused, I think, quite a bit, but it's often easy to forget.
You talked a lot about having the right partners, but how do you find them in the first place?
I was very lucky. So in the two partners I have, I met them through customer engagements. So in working for different people. In the previous two partners, they were people that I had already done partnership relationships with. I'd either done some consulting with them. In the case of the printing and document company that I came from, actually, after consulting for him long enough, he's like, well, you're here all the time. Why don't you just stay here and help me run this? Like, okay. And it seems like you run in, and with the right mindset and with the right solutions, you run into people and you just seem to find each other. It seems tough to quantify, actually. But when you're doing what you know is right, and you're coming up with the right solution, and you are as verbose apparently as I, enough people tend to hear these stories, and you tend to find that you have some commonalities. So I know with Judy who's sitting back there, there was a lot of conversations, and knowing she had the right mindset that I completely loved and loved working with Renee, my other partner, knowing that we were both incredibly type A in exactly the same kinds of things, and finding that there were way too many similarities in everything and a lot of things in the way we approached them, instantly clicked. And yeah, again, fortunate, incredibly fortunate to find both of them. Because by myself, could I have muddled through some of it? Maybe. Would it have been as much fun? No. Absolutely not.
Very good. Charles is going to stay around.